California became the first state to sue the Trump administration over sanctuary city funding. Officials there say the government does not have the right to deny funding to those cities. This is a look at cities, counties, and states across the country that are considered sanctuary jurisdictions. Here's California's Attorney General.
California is a donor state to the federal treasury. We always give more in federal taxpayer dollars than we give back. Now we're being told we won't get some of those dollars back that we not only deserve but are entitled to, simply because we won't follow Donald Trump's edicts on immigration. When those threats come at us, we will take them on.
Meanwhile, Attorney General Jeff Sessions planning to give a speech in Miami tomorrow to praise the city for losing its sanctuary city status. Steve Cortes joining me now. He's the spokesman for Hispanic 100. He was also on the Trump Hispanic Advisory Council during the presidential campaign. Steve, good to see you.
Hi, Sandra. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get first to this lawsuit, the first of its kind in the state of California. Where does this go?
Right. And by the way, Chicago, where I am right now, my home city, is also suing the federal government over this very same issue. But people like the Attorney General of California, like Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, they really remind me a lot of people like George Wallace in the 1960s who flouted federal law for their own narrow political agenda. Here's the reality. When it comes to immigration, federal law is paramount. So they cannot decide on their own what national immigration policy should be. But moreover, just on the practical nature, forget sort of the legality of it, on the practical nature, what they're doing is saying that to appease politically correct supporters, we're going to not protect our citizens, whether they be legal immigrants or native-born people. And we're going to say if you're an illegal immigrant and on top of that you commit a crime, that we will not cooperate with the federal government in deporting you. We're going to defy the law, again, to pursue our own narrow, politically correct agenda. I think that's outrageous.
And it's amazing. The Democratic Attorney General in San Francisco also filed its own federal lawsuit last Friday. They're saying they're filing on behalf of smaller cities and counties there that may not have the resources to challenge the federal administration. We just showed you that map of sanctuary cities across the country where you're seeing the jurisdictions. Steve, is this something that will continue? Will we see more cities, counties, and states follow suit?
Well, you know, Sandra, I hope not. And the reason I think not is because we have a U.S. Attorney General who is taking a strong stance on this. And I think with the power of the purse strings, which the federal government has, I think we will force these cities to acquiesce, as they should, by the way, and protect their citizens. You know, here in Chicago over the weekend, we had 9 people killed in gunfire, dozens of people shot. And what is our mayor focused on? He's focused on trying to grandstand against Donald Trump instead of worrying about the safety of people right here in our city. And part of that safety, whether it's California or Chicago or wherever it is, part of it is when you have someone who doesn't have permission to be here in the first place. And look, I love legal immigration. I'm an Hispanic. I'm the son of an immigrant. But when you have someone who is here without permission in the first place, and on top of that, they are committing crimes, they are dangerous to the citizens of our country, they need to be gone yesterday.
Steve, I want to share with you, since you're obviously so passionate about this, sitting right there in the city of Chicago, and a lot of talk about what the mayor is doing there and not doing. Jeff Sessions said this in response to the Chicago suit last week. Quote, "No amount of federal taxpayer dollars will help a city that refuses to help its own residents to a degree perhaps unsurpassed by any other jurisdiction. The political leadership of Chicago has chosen deliberately and intentionally to adopt a policy that obstructs this country's lawful immigration system." Steve, backing up what we just heard from you.
Right, and I think, by the way, Sessions is so correct in that regard. I think largely, too, what people like Mayor Emanuel are what they're doing, it's a diversionary tactic. So instead of looking at the situation Chicago is in, which is a fiscal cliff that this city is careening over, our budget is so badly broken, which is utterly failing schools. In just a couple of weeks, most kids in Chicago are going to go back to failing schools. And then on top of that, as we've mentioned, cities that are like the Wild West. We're the most dangerous city right now in the developed world. So instead of addressing those massive macro problems, sometimes it's convenient politically to create a diversion. Let's instead make Donald Trump the boogeyman here. Well, he's not. And Mayor Emanuel and the Attorney General of California and the Mayor of San Francisco, they need to protect people like Kate Steinle. They need to protect young black black kids on the west side of Chicago who are afraid to go to the park, and they need to stop worrying about their politically correct agendas.
It's not a good situation. It's a very scary situation. Of course, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, announcing this big speech that's going to be happening tomorrow afternoon. Steve, what do you expect further to hear from this Attorney General on this?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned, this is an Attorney General who means business, Mr. Sessions. So I think he is going to be emphatic about what the consequences will be if they continue to defy federal law, just as the southern states defied federal law in the 1960s, but were eventually forced to comply. So I think he'll be specific with the sanctions there. And also, by the way, I'd point out, Donald Trump was not ambiguous about this in 2016. As a matter of fact, it was one of the cornerstones of his campaign, was getting control of our border and getting dangerous people who don't belong here out. He's made unbelievable progress on both of those scores already. Illegal crossings at the border have plunged. Dangerous people who don't belong here are being deported at an accelerated pace. So I guess I would say to the people who don't like this policy, well, win the election then, because Trump largely won on this promise.
All right, Steve Cortes, great to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.